Well, first of all, welcome, Dr. George Simon. It's such a pleasure to be speaking to you today. You're a world-renowned psychologist, but also more specifically, you're a world-leading expert in character disordered personalities, what we commonly know as narcissistic personality or narcissistic behavior. But I think even so, you're very much an educator and an influencer around character itself, and why it's so important for us to cultivate and grow and develop character in our everyday life. And I could probably say that we're in a position in point in time in our lives that this is just becoming so important. And I was drawn to your work, like so many of your thousands of followers, because it provided so much hope. And I think, for me personally and professionally, I was very affected by some of these particular, these people. And I think, your work was the first time I'd found something that actually made sense, where it really helped me understand why these particular people think the way they do, behave the way they do, and how we can, I guess, protect ourselves from these types of behaviors and potentially others. But more importantly, how we can inspire good character, and how do we lead with good character? And certainly, leadership is something that I'm so passionate about, and character is just an essential ingredient to leadership. And I'd love to explore that more with you today.
Well, I'm certainly happy to be with you, Anna. I've always enjoyed our conversations in the past, and I'm so grateful that you have found my work helpful. There's nothing more edifying to me than to have individuals who have been in relationships with character disturbed people get a breath of fresh air, a fresh understanding, something that helps empower them. There's nothing more satisfying than that. But also it's satisfying to be working with people who are in various stages of their own personal development and have a lot of character growing to do. And having learned, as I've learned over the years, that it is not a hopeless situation as we once thought, but it really requires a highly specialized form of work. So it's just as satisfying to work with folks, develop their character, because as I so often say, character matters. It always has, it always will, and it matters more than we care to think sometimes. And as soon as we decide that it really matters again and devote the kind of time and energy that we once did to all of our enterprises in making character count, and especially rewarding it instead of encouraging bad character, as we so often inadvertently do, then things are really going to change for the better. And we're going to usher in a positive new age of growth. And that's what my work is all about.
Mm. And what are you seeing in the world today? I mean, this work, your work, and the work we talk about potentially together to help inspire a new wave of leadership. What are you seeing as the most important thing now? And what do you hope through the work that you've done over the years will potentially inspire? Where do you think we are at the moment in terms of leadership in the world?
Well, there's this concept within Earth economics of sustainability, and it's more than just the environment. Certain of our models of just how we do business, how we relate to one another, how we organize our civic affairs, how we navigate through our relationships. Certain models that we've been in for several years, they're just unsustainable. We've been steeped in an age of entitlement and permissiveness and relativism, especially entitlement, and we've become indulged and overly self-satisfied, and it's affected every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
And nature is telling us in no uncertain terms that the ways we have been going about things on a number of fronts are just simply unsustainable. And why that's good news is that we are beginning to discern what is the model for true sustainability, what will carry us to a new age not an age of entitlement and hedonism and permissiveness and all that, but an age of imaginative growth and true prosperity. We're on the cusp of that, I think.
But it certainly feels that way, but I just wonder, in terms of our human nature, is that we are born in many ways as brutal people. Just if you look at our past and the way we've evolved, is there something different now that you're sensing? Do you think? I mean, we always have this innate humanity to us, don't we? That shows up, and we don't always appreciate it and like it, especially when it's done to us. But we see this. We've seen this through history. So is it really going to change? I certainly hope so.
Yes. Well, with respect to history, human existence is just but a blip in the vast spans of time. Evolution takes a long time. And so what seems to us like it's an eternity in the grand scheme of things is just a blip in time. It was not that long ago, for example, that we were carving our villages into mountainsides and carrying our water in pails and doing things very, very differently. In the grand scheme of things, even a few thousand years is a very short period of time. So human evolution takes a long time. We're still evolving. We're still evolving. But staying stuck in some of the ways that we've been stuck in for the last several decades is just simply unsustainable. It's time to move on. And it's also time to really pay attention to the most pressing issue of our time, and that is character. You're right. We are at the core all brutes. We are. But we are so much more, and we are capable of so much more. And that's the whole point of character. That's what it's all about, is developing our resources so that we rise to a higher level. And that's what we have to do if we're going to survive. We can't survive as mere brutes. Work.
It absolutely doesn't. Absolutely not. And I just on the whole idea of character. So into the books that you've written, they've been best-selling books. In Sheep's Clothing, Character Disturbance, and you've written The Judas Syndrome and How Did We End Up Here, all very well received books with so many thousands of followers around the world. And your most recent one, which is called The Essentials for the Journey. And my sense of having read your books is that a lot of there are some really important definitions around character disordered individuals, why they think the way they do, why they behave the way they do. But also there's some real practical guidance around how we can develop character. And you speak about the 10 commandments of character. And I must say, when I read those commandments, I was just so excited. I finally found something that resonated with so much truth, and I was able to share it with my friends and my colleagues, and I was just super excited about what the potential for these 10 commandments could also do for leaders and organizations. And so I'd love to explore these more with you today, and maybe if you can tell us a bit more about how they originated and why you think why they are such an important part of character.
They originated, Anna, with my work with disturbed characters over the years. I've worked for almost 40 years with individuals of some kind of character impairment of one type or another or degree. And they've taught me a few things about the life lessons that they failed to learn that would have helped them be different people had they mastered those lessons. So the 10 commandments, as I call them, are the essential life lessons that all of us not only need to learn, but we need to take them to heart, make them a part of ourselves, commit ourselves to them, and try to live them out in our actions in everyday life and all our encounters.
Mm. Yeah, wonderful. I mean, you talk about taking them to heart. And I remember something that you once said to me that I take into my work every day now, which is that behavior doesn't change until hearts change. And we often see so many cultural transformation programs happen within companies. And we know that there are a set of values, and those values are tied to how behaviors show up. But until we actually get leaders and people in organizations to have a change of heart, and that, again, really ties with the direction of the company. People need to feel a sense of a heart connection to the direction of the company. Right. And so I think, it's really important to explore this idea of hearts changing in organizations.
Right. Historically, whether we're consulting with a business or we're working with an individual to help them make improvements in their lives or in their daily affairs, we typically have tried to reason and tried to appeal to their rational mind, explaining how things would work better this way or that way. But that is not really what affects people, and that's not really what affects change. What affects change is an opening not of this mind, but of this mind to a whole different way of seeing and doing things. Yeah. It's that kind of personal transformation that makes big differences in everything. So it's not so much even what you do sometimes, it's how you do it. I learned that firsthand in my work with some of the most character impaired people. I learned that, for one thing, one of the things I was going to have to do was confront some very ugly issues. Well, confronting ugly issues, especially when you're talking about defects of character, that's not pretty work. So it's not so much what you have to do, it's how you have to do it. It's not going to be received by a closed, hardened heart. And so all the changes that really matter, happen here. The rest, relatively speaking, is a piece of cake. Somebody might, for example, the first commandment is all about making yourself aware of the bigger picture. We're all connected. This is a vast enterprise, so intricately interconnected and so mind-boggling that it's just hard to wrap our heads around. Just being mindful of that fact.
Let's read that out. I would love to read your first commandment. You are not the center of the universe. Whether you understand or appreciate the fact, you're but a part of something much bigger than you can possibly comprehend. We and everything else in creation are all inherently connected. Be mindful, therefore, of how you, your yearnings and aspirations, and most especially your behavior, impact everyone and everything that exists. And then you mention here, expand your awareness. I mean, this is really a powerful message. And when I think about this particular commandment, I think about the purpose of an organization and how so many organizations today are striving for purpose. But in my experience, I so often walk into organizations and you see the mission and an attempt potentially at a purpose and a set of values. But often the rest of the organization don't even know what they are. They can't remember them. And often they create these as more of a PR or marketing exercise. And they're not truly embedded within the culture of the organization. And so I just wonder what it really takes to build a truly purpose-led organization, because if the message isn't genuine, then people aren't going to be engaged or seek meaning in their work. And I think we're seeing a rapid change now with the Great Resignation in the United States. People are leaving. People have choice and people are leaving. If they don't have true meaning in their work, if businesses aren't truly purpose-led, if they're not serving something higher than the organization itself, then they really will struggle to remain relevant in the future.
This is something that's absolutely astounding the physicists too. when I talk about impact, we are now learning that an action at the micro level, at the atomic level, within quanta, an action somewhere in the universe has an effect gazillions of miles away.
Mm.
How is this possible
Yes.
unless we are all connected, unless everything is connected? This kind of an expanded mental view of things is one thing, but how it affects us here, to just be aware of that and to think, you know what, everything I say or do, even conceive of, has impact.
Mm.
And what do I want the nature of that impact to be? How do I see myself? And how do I see this vast enterprise that I'm a part of? Where do I want to go? Where do I see us operating as we are 15 years from now, unless things change? All those things are not just mental activities, they're matters of the heart.
Mm.
You have to care about the bigger picture. You
Mm.
have to care about your place. You not only have to be aware of it and astounded by it, but impacted by it yourself.
Mm.
And it changes things. It changes you. And in changing you, it's going to change the way you operate within any system.
Absolutely. I often say you can teach people, but you can't force people to change. You can only inspire people.
You can only inspire.
And you talk about this and you see so much leadership be focused on the short term. I mean, this is what has created successful organizations today, is the focus on the short term. And how do leaders really change their leadership to focus on the long term and build sustainable companies? That is a matter of character. If they are to really create engaging workforces and cultures that are going to keep people and retain people.
And as has been true through all of history, Anna, there are powerful forces working against that.
Mm-hmm.
Not the least of which is the allure of fame, fortune, vast riches. I mean, these are powerful forces affecting people's motivations. You know, they might see the bigger picture, but they also, in their heart, might say, well, you know what? I think what I'm just going to do is I'm going to milk this enterprise for all that I can, gain as much wealth and benefit from it as I can. And, well, what happens after that just happens. That's a matter of the heart.
Absolutely. And we've spoken about this quite a lot, in that you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You have seeming success all around you. What's your real incentive to change? How do you inspire that incentive to change, knowing that that CEO is going to have such an impact on hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people?
Yeah. Well, I know what it has meant on a personal level to come to a different place. And I think that that same inspiration has to be afforded other individuals. When you finally do see a good part of the big picture, you realize something about existence itself. You realize some things about existence itself. First, it's a totally unearned gift. And secondly, it's ageless, it's timeless. We're now beginning to even understand the physics of that. We're realizing just how brilliant Einstein was and how unfathomable some of his thoughts were. But the fact is that this is an eternal enterprise. And what is within us that really makes us us is also eternal.
Mm-hmm.
All of this, the trappings, the physical part of us, I guess you would say in other speak, the non-spiritual part of us, the material part of us, it's temporary.
Mm-hmm.
All of this other stuff is temporary. Every single megalomaniac, every single multi-billionaire on a material level is going to end up in the same place on a material level.
Yes.
But there is an essence about existence that is timeless and ageless and eternal. And once you know that, once you know it, you can't unknow it. You can, if you have a heart hard enough, you can reject it. But once you know it, you can't unknow it. So you have to reach hearts.
Yeah.
You have to reach hearts. You have to meet individuals where they are. And that includes CEOs and other leaders within organizations. You have to, as a psychologist, I'm trained to assess and diagnose. And in my training workshops, I reiterate an old axiom, and that is that to intervene in any situation, to intervene without proper assessment and diagnosis, and not in accordance with appropriate assessments and diagnosis, is the very definition of malpractice. What that means is, if I just start doing things without having some awareness of what it is I think I'm intervening for, and what the current state of the art is about how you should deal with a certain situation or a certain condition, I'm malpracticing. Well, the same thing is true when you're approaching a CEO or any other leadership team in an organization. You have to know where they are. Where are they on the journey? How are they doing at embracing some of these principles? Where are they? You have to know that before you can even begin to strategize, well, how am I going to appeal? How am I going to inspire? That's the first thing.
Yeah, and I must admit, that's where a lot of my work is helping leaders find that true, authentic voice to be able to connect. And I think in many ways, what's happening in the world with the Great Resignation, it is providing an incentive for leaders, because if they don't come out with some resonance to truth or with an authenticity about them, then people simply won't stay in these organizations in the long term. They'll consider them temporary places, but they won't necessarily have full commitment to their future. And so I think it's a really interesting time, and it's a very interesting test for top leaders of organizations to really come out with a sense of truth in what they do.
And once again, we come back to this whole issue of sustainability of systems. And, we have this one mega system that no individual can fully wrap their mind or heart around. And then we have all of these subsystems operating within this system. And the sustainability of any system is only going to be, in large measure, determined by the weakest links within the system. Back in my days as a sound engineer, I used to say to folks, you could spend hundreds of dollars on fancy amplifying equipment and low distortion preamplifiers and the very best of head-end equipment. And then if you're outputting to a pair of 2-inch cheap tin speakers, it's going to sound just like that. all of the fantastic equipment that you put into it is going to sound just like tin, because the weakest link in your system is of insufficient character, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And how do you help leaders identify these characters? Because in my experience working with executive teams specifically, is that there often is one or two in that team that affects the entire culture because of the nature of their disturbed personality. And
Right.
How do you really help a good CEO that is committed to building a good organization with a strong culture, but has these one or two people that they're carrying, and they, by the mere fact of how they operate, they manage to manipulate themselves into these positions, and in some way can make themselves indispensable often as well.
Right.
They're able to give good impressions to the board. They manipulate their entire surrounding and situation, and it's very difficult to draw them out of an organization.
Right. So let's make an analogy to the human body, because that's a very complex system. And every part has a function, even parts that we don't normally recognize. There are all kinds of processes going on inside all the time. But occasionally, for one reason or another, one of the parts becomes problematic, and it affects the whole system. And there are those cases that even though the part brings some value to the whole enterprise, and perhaps with enough modification, enough assistance, enough externally imposed structure, it can operate okay. There's sometimes when the only appropriate solution is an amputation. Sometimes the only thing is an excision. You have to get rid of the bad part in order for the system as a whole to continue. It certainly won't continue until that part is replaced or refurbished. But there are some times when all of the best intentions, all of the best support systems, all of the best ways of helping to modify the way a part of the system operates just isn't enough to sustain the system's health. And so it just has to be excised. So there's that possibility. But I'm the eternal optimist. I always think that unless a person is truly heartless, and unfortunately, we do have some folks among us that would be an appropriate description, that unless a person is heartless, there is a way to reach them.
Yes.
And the astute leaders within an organization know how to work with folks' strengths and weaknesses. They know how to assess those strengths and weaknesses. And they don't just use that knowledge to exploit a situation and make the best out of things, and therefore, quote unquote, use people, their best potential. They do more than that. They have in mind the bigger picture.
Yes.
They have the entire health of the organization in mind. They have the impact of the organization on the larger system of the world in which it operates. And they take all of that into consideration. You know, these commandments, they all work together.
Yeah.
They all work together. And it's hard for me to imagine a visionary leader or a visionary CEO that is really changing the face of things. It's hard for me to imagine such a person who isn't mindful of the bigger picture, who doesn't have some degree of gratitude for the opportunity that is before them, that doesn't have the internal resources to exercise good, mindful self-control, that doesn't have the commitment to honesty, to admit mistakes when they are made, and to honestly try to correct them. All these commandments that I talk about, they all work together. The effective leader has to have the balanced sense of self that I talk about. It can't be all about them. If it's all about them, the system is going to collapse in no time. You know, and they also can't have no self-confidence at all, no self-image at all. They can't be so wishy-washy that they're leaving their company vulnerable to every predator on the planet.
So
So
often it's not a function, just a function of the leader itself or the CEO itself. Often you do have good quality leaders that have the capacity to demonstrate these qualities of character, but sometimes it's the system itself that is flawed, and it could be how the board is structured. It could be a variety of different things, and they often find themselves a victim to the system itself, which is a very difficult thing to change. It takes so much courage. It takes a lot of facing into what you call the truth, and having a reverence for the truth.
Right. And this is again where that axiom about malpractice and right practice comes in. If you haven't assessed the overall character of the system, like you said, has a character of its own.
Yep.
It has a personality of its own. And so the astute consultant has done their homework with respect to assessing not just the health of the organization, but the overall character of the system. And that tells you pretty much, if that assessment is done properly, then that tells you pretty much what the interventions need to be to help restore the organization itself to better health.
I completely agree. A big part of what I do is helping organizations at that executive level to establish truth. And it's always a real surprise that quality leaders don't have an inclination to move towards the truth. I think a lot of the time it comes down to fear, potentially, because the system doesn't allow for truth. But I think also you do have those, as we mentioned, select individuals who have a lot of self-interest and generally push their own agenda, and there's a lot of spin, and which could potentially lead to deceit. But when I do come in and bring this quality of truth to a team, it's not comfortable. It's a very uncomfortable process. But the way you see people's eyes light up because they finally see that there's something tangible we can work with here. There's something real, and you always get a far greater commitment and a far greater sense of ownership when you work with the truth.
Yes. Well, you've opened up a little bit of a can of worms here, Anna, and I'm so glad that you did, because this is where my work and a lot of others work in the same area that I have worked in for years differs just a little bit, but significantly so. And that is the role of fear versus other factors. Yes, I think fear is a factor when it comes to addressing these complex and daunting problems, but I don't think it's the biggest factor. The biggest factor has to do with the fact that we are creatures of economy. We don't inherently like work. It's a four-letter word, W-O-R-K. It's truly a four-letter word. Yeah. And we have spent, if our technological innovations throughout the centuries have taught us anything, is that we've always tried to reduce the burden on ourselves, to maximize all the pleasure we can have for the least amount of work we have to do to get it. It's our whole history. So we are creatures of economy. And the labor that is required for a bigger vision, a sustainable vision, is a commitment to the work of building a better something, however you see it. And that's a matter of the heart. That's what genuine love is all about. And all of these commandments speak to the overriding one. Love is not a sentiment. It's not a feeling. It's not even the raw attraction that people sometimes feel. It's an impelling behavior. It's something you put out there with no expectation, but with a vision to build and create and to participate in this vast enterprise that is already going along without us quite well. Thank you very much, and has for centuries. We have the power with our selfishness and our greed and all of our other tendencies to mess things up quite a bit. But this universe was here before we got here and will likely be here long after we're gone. Okay, so if we're going to make it to a new level, and if we're going to make it as a species, we have to kind of get with the program. And that's what it's all about. But it does involve work. And as soon as we reckon with that, and as soon as we have the heart for it, the burden gets a little bit easier. So a lot of the decisions that sick CEOs and sick leaders make within sick business systems, a lot of those decisions that are truly sick have to do with expediency, have to do with wanting either to put things off, not attend to things that they know are tough and are going to be painful, and that people are going to whine and complain, and to just not do it. And especially to not do it if they don't see an immediate reward. If there's nothing in it for me, then why should I do it? These character issues revisit us ever since our childhood, when we're learning to delay gratification, when we're looking to set aside short-term rewards for longer-term gains and all like that. All those lessons that we're supposed to learn as children, they keep revisiting us over and over and over again. And unfortunately, we have some very thick heads, most of us. And so we just have to revisit those lessons over and over again.
Yeah, I just love that. I love that love is a behavior. Love is hard work, and we often I like to use the word love in leadership, but it comes with such and then as you're talking about this, it becomes with such a discomfort. And probably because it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to harbor. It's not an easy thing to develop, like any behavior in terms of change. But to bring, and that's one of the values that I work with in my company, is that we do lead from love. And that brings me to the second commandment as well, which is around gratitude and being grateful. And I also love how in your work, in your book, you've mentioned that gratitude is an attitude.
Yes.
It just, again, drills down to how important these 10 commandments are in terms of our actions, in terms of our behaviors. They're not just a set of principles that we can look up on the wall and hope and strive for. They take such hard work and commitment. But I think about gratitude in leadership and embracing gratitude. When I think of embracing gratitude, or when I'm in the sentiment, not even the sentiment, when I'm in gratitude, so much happens. I naturally have more openness. I'm more transparent. I have greater care for people. I have greater compassion for people. I mean, this is what the gift of gratitude does for us. And I just feels like so much of what we see in organizations can be the complete opposite of that.
Well, in an age of entitlement, that's perfectly understandable. We have been for decades just bombarded with a sense of entitlement. It's rampant there. And by the way, if there's no reward in something, and it's not a substantial reward, and it's not as quick as I want it, in an entitlement culture, people wonder, what's the point? Why should I? Is the question that most people ask in their hearts. Why should I? If there's nothing in it for me, and there's not a lot in it for me, because after all, I'm special. I know I'm special, and I'm entitled. Then why should I? Why should I put myself out? What's the point? And of course, if you're not seeing the bigger picture, and you're not seeing the opportunity that you've been afforded to use your gifts as a gift in itself, all these commandments, they work together. It's all a part of It's all a part of a lover's mindset. Lovers will help sustain us. The takers, the plunderers, the exploiters, the abusers, as they have every time throughout the ages, will destroy us. They'll die, they always have, but they take people with them. They take enterprises with them. It's not healthy and it's not sustainable. If we're going to make it, we have to do a much better job of learning how to love so that we can take appropriate care of ourselves and each other, build and create, thrive and prosper truly again. That's how it's going to have to happen. And that change has to occur one heart at a time.
Do you think, in light of what we're seeing in the world right now with the Ukraine and Vladimir Putin and what's happening, and with so many hearts being broken, how do you stay committed to hope and change and the change of heart?
You know, I read an article that made the point that less than 100 men throughout all of human history have been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of millions of people.
Wow.
Think about that for a minute. Less than 100 men throughout the entire course of recorded human history have been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of millions of men, women, and children. Yeah. That's pretty.
Yeah.
It's pretty mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling. Absolutely.
And the reason for that is that we have these archetypal dominators. They've been with us since the dawn of time. They rabidly seek power. They seek it for its own sake. And they will inevitably abuse it if we afford it to them. And they had a place in our early evolution because they were the fearless warlords that helped us get through some difficult times. But that model of human leadership, oh boy, those words just came to me. That model of human leadership is unsustainable for the long term. It's unsustainable. So even though we still have these folks, no longer should we afford them power. And we have to get better at recognizing them. And we have to get much, much better at understanding that if we afford them power, they will inevitably abuse it, and they will inevitably exploit, and we will all suffer as a result. Same is true in organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're now at a time of inspiring a new form of leadership to preserve humanity in many ways, aren't we? I mean, that's really what we're looking at now. That's the reality we're facing into. And it will require a very, very strong sense of character in order to be able to deal with some of the biggest issues of our time.
Right. The universe is tens of billions of years old already. It's likely to be here tens of billions of years into the future. Whether or not we're part of the picture, interestingly enough, as species go, that's largely up to us.
Yes.
And the only thing that we know for certain is that certain ways that we have been seeing things and doing things and impacting the world around us are unsustainable. We won't be here unless we have the kind of change of heart and mind that allows us to not only grasp the bigger picture and embrace the bigger picture, not only feel the immense gratitude that we rightfully ought to feel for this immense gift that we've been given, and not only come to appreciate our place, but have the heart to give of ourselves and to give back and to do our best to make the character of the place in which we all live better.
Yeah, it's such a honor to be on this journey with you, because every time I have a conversation with you, my heart changes, and I certainly become more and more inspired to be a force for good, and hope that from this conversation that we've created something that people can take and also be inspired to take their character and make it central to their development, and make it something that they continue to grow and develop, because we are being asked more than ever before to step up. And I am so grateful that we get to have this conversation and for it to potentially have an impact on so many people.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very confident in that regard, Anna. I am confident that when truth is shared, that even the hardest and most closed, even the most pompous human hearts recognize it. Now, they might not be in a place at that given time and place to embrace it, but they recognize it. This is what I was taught so very directly in my work with character impaired people. Some things are very hard to face, especially when you're dealing with folks with significant disturbances of character. Sometimes the truth is pretty hard to hear. But if you don't tell it, there is no foundation. So a person might not be ready, but when they are, they will remember, they will take it seriously. They might even find it in their heart to be grateful. I have found that time and time and time again. And it's not my place to decide when somebody's ready, but it's still my obligation to tell the truth.
The truth. Oh, I mean, we can finish on that note, because that is definitely one of the key takeaways here is stay truthful, be honest, don't lie, stay truthful. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful hour exploring the commandments, exploring character, and I very much look forward to our continued conversations.
Thank you, Anna. It was great to be with you as always.